Hello, happy Saturday, everybody. We're here, we're
Yes,
live. I think I
live,
saw a
almost
couple
ready to
people hanging out
go.
in chat. Be 4 people, so we're gonna just kind of chill for a little bit. People a chance to get in. Or my live tweet went out. I scheduled it to go out. Yep, it's that. All right, cool. There's RFB. How you doing, Anthony? Good to see you. All right. I am super tired today, man.
Yeah, it was an
Super tired.
early morning prepping for the garage sale today.
Yeah,
Ooh.
Josh and I both did yard sales today separately without consulting each other. It was just kind of a random event.
It's been a while since I've seen 7 a.m. to be honest with you. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, rough. And I
since
was
school
up
shut
until
down, I haven't had to wake up that early.
I was up until about 2:30. I was restoring a laptop I wanted to get rid of at the yard sale today, and it took forever to reset
Mm,
that thing. So late night, early morning.
yep.
All right. Well, I think this is gonna be. Hey, Rez, how you doing? Good to see you. I think this is gonna be a bit of a long one, so I am gonna kick this off if you're ready.
Get it started.
All right, cool. Recording. All right. Sliding down in my chair. Hey, Cat. What's up, Vader's girl? Good to see ya. All right. All right. You ready?
Ready.
Here comes that intro.
This podcast is part of the Red 5 Network. For more Red 5 Network podcasts, visit red5network.com.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
Hello there, everyone out in the galaxy, either watching us live on YouTube right now or listening later on a podcatcher near you. This is episode 40 of From a Certain Point of View. I'm Josh,
I'm Adam.
and we are back once again we're very excited about this episode. Not only is this our 40th episode, and 40 seems to be a pretty special number for Star Wars when it comes to anniversaries.
Yeah.
We are
Especially the last few
going
years, right?
Yes, but we are doing our special. We're returning to thank the maker today, or behind the scenes look at A New Hope, the Star Wars film that started it all. Um, but Adam, what have you been up to watching and playing this week?
I watched A New Hope once through with some audio commentary on. Get ready for this. Do I? I'll talk about this a little later, but I've been doing some well, not really reading, but kind of skimming through the making of Star Wars. Is a book by J.W. Rinsler. Really good stuff. So that was pretty fun. Last night I watched The Last Crusade, Indiana Jones. So not
Nice.
Star Wars, but still within the Lucasfilm realm.
Hmm.
And that's about it. I've been doing a little gaming, but mostly just retro stuff. I will say this: this is Star Wars related. Do you remember Shadows of the Empire on N64?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
I played that a
I
little
have
bit.
fond memories of that game. Yeah.
Yeah, go back and try it again. It doesn't age that great. So,
Yeah,
um,
my memories might not be. My memories are probably better than the actual experience
yeah,
itself.
yeah,
You know.
I think that happened with this one.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I have very fond memories of playing that back in the day too, and I played that a little bit this week. So
What's the name of the main character in that game?
That's Dash Rendar, right?
Dash Run. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Who is canon, by the way,
Hmm.
which is cool.
Interesting.
Yeah, he was mentioned in one of the Han Solo books, I think, around Solo. So,
Oh yeah, yeah. I think I heard that. Heard about that. Yeah.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, Dash Rendar's still there.
Hmm.
RFB's in chat. He still has his N64 with Shadows, the actual hardware. That's awesome.
Yeah, man.
I
I
had
don't even
to,
know
yeah, I had to play it a little
where mine is at this point.
less
Could
than
be
legally.
anywhere.
I may have downloaded a ROM to play it. I cannot
There you go.
confirm or deny if that happened.
No shame in that. No shame.
No, not at all. But yeah, so that's what I've been up to. What about you?
Well, first of all, I'm just excited that my technology is working today. I got the new mic hooked up. I got a different set of headphones on, and it's actually working. So I'm feeling happy about that. Um, but I started binge watching the first season of Ozark. I'm almost all the way through the first season, and it's just I love it so far. It's an excellent show. I might have even mentioned that last week. I've been continuing to watch that and enjoying that. Of course, I watched A New Hope, um, and I've had the itch to watch The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises again.
Mm, yeah.
Um, so I started The Dark Knight yesterday, and
Force of Light
hoping
did that to you, didn't they?
yes, they did that to me
Yeah, thanks,
for
Natalie and
sure.
Michelle.
um, but yeah,
uh,
that's about
I
it,
actually had a little
But
conversation about that, about Dark Knight Rises with a friend of mine, Nathan,
hmm
who's been on the show once. It was a while ago, but
yeah,
he was on the show
yeah,
once. I think that Dark Knight Rises is a very, very underrated Batman movie, and I think it's only
mhm,
underrated because it followed the Dark Knight, which was an impossible task.
yeah, yeah. I agree that it's underrated.
Yeah,
I enjoyed that film almost as much as The Dark Knight. I think sometimes because I've been to Pittsburgh so many times, I was like so
yeah,
excited in the beginning. I was so excited that they were shooting in Pittsburgh and everything. I was like, oh,
right,
this is awesome.
right.
But now when I watch it, it pulls me out just a little bit
I
because
can
I'm like
see
so
that. I can see that. Yeah, just
that's the
seeing
only
Heinz
thing.
Ward and
From
yeah,
yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah,
it.
just
Just kind of pulls me out of it a little bit, but
we're actually going to
other
talk
than
about
that, I
that a
don't.
little bit with the New Hope talk about
Yes,
that type of
yes,
effect. So that's an
yes, indeed.
interesting
We'll
tie-in to
put a
later in
pin
the
in that
show.
one then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Um, and we did have once again a weekly poll, and gonna open the results of that up. The weekly poll was as we had the Emmy nominations that were released this week. The question was, will The Mandalorian win the Emmy for Outstanding Drama Series? We had 48% who felt yes. This was a tight race,
It
and
was, yeah.
52% who said no. Now I tend to lean towards the no as well, even though I would love for it to win. Um, it's got some competition for sure. I mean, Ozark is among the shows that it's competing with. Stranger Things, Better Call Saul, which just had its best season, in my opinion,
Right.
of the whole series. You got The Crown in there. Um, trying to think of
Handmaiden's
who
Tale.
else. Handmaiden's Tale.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so there's a lot of competition there. Killing Eve, Succession. Yeah, so it definitely has some competition. I think it would be a stretch for it to win, but it would be awesome if it did. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll say to them, to everyone listening, what I said to you before we started recording. If John Williams can make a stellar soundtrack for the Rise of Skywalker on his last Star Wars outing ever, and not take home an award for that, and then I don't think there's
Mhm.
much hope for the Mandalorian. Uh, Sad,
Yeah,
but I think that's just the way it is with Star Wars and in general. So
yeah. I think unfortunately, at least for the most part, like the Marvel movies and the Star Wars movies, those types of
yeah,
movies
yeah,
often
right.
get overlooked when it comes to being recognized um, for
Yeah,
awards.
yep.
But
I would
so,
agree.
Adam, tell us about what's coming up on today's show.
Well, we got some news, and then I'm worried this show might be a little bit of a longer one because we're talking, like you said, we're going back to thank the maker this week. We took a little break last week, but going to the original trilogy, and we're going to talk about A New Hope, and there is a lot to talk about with A New Hope.
Hmm.
It went through some stuff before it got to theaters in 1977, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And it's going to be a fun one, but it might be a little bit long, so buckle up. We'll just
Hang
go
in
ahead
there with
and
us.
we'll just go ahead and get the news going right now, so that
You
we
might
can.
want to buckle up, baby.
Well, you want the bad news or the really bad news?
Kicking off the news this week, we've been having a lot of rumors about Solo possibly getting a sequel in the form of a Disney Plus series. Um, some of the initial rumors there would be like separate shows, maybe like a Crimson Dawn show featuring Maul and Kira, maybe a Lando series. Um, but there was an additional rumor here that showed up on Star Wars Newsnet. According to the website Star Wars Unity, which I've never heard of personally, so again, just take everything with a grain of salt, was that in the year, here we go, the solo plans for a Solo Crime Syndicate spin-offs have been shifted into more of a full-fledged continuation to Solo, a Star Wars story, and what sounds like a pseudo Solo verse, say that 3 times fast, um, with Alden Ehrenreich returning to play Han Solo, and it would set up the rumored Lando series and beyond. So this is a rumor that I actually hope is true because again, we spoke last week about how I would like the sequel to Solo to be a continuation um, in a Disney Plus series that includes like the ensemble, all of the characters and everything. So again, just a rumor, but any thoughts on this one?
I'm taking it with a grain of salt. I would
Yeah,
love to see it happen. I think I don't know. I don't know. It feels rumorish to me, after the Donald
it feels
Glover stuff,
rumorish.
and yeah,
Yeah, I agree, but it feels right at the same time. Like I just think again, I will echo what I've said before that it would make so much
yeah,
sense for there to be a sequel to Solo and for there to be a Disney Plus series. And I would love to see all the characters back, and maybe they spin off into other shows eventually. But I'd love to see a continuation of where that film left off.
yeah.
So I hope this is true, but we'll see.
I can get on
Yeah.
board with that.
Yeah. Next up, in more TV news, uh, and I mentioned this earlier, that The Mandalorian has been nominated for several Emmys this year, 15 nominations actually, ranging from costuming to editing to voice work, including Outstanding Guest Actor for Giancarlo Esposito as Moff Gideon, and for the show itself, an Outstanding Drama Series. Um, Ludwig Göransson also was nominated for Outstanding Music Composition, and Taika Waititi was nominated for his voice acting as IG-11 in the final episode of the series. There's a full list of nominations on StarWarsNewsNet.com. So, Adam, I know you're not huge into the award shows and
You're right, right.
and all that stuff, but I got to say this is exciting news for The Mandalorian to be at least nominated for 15 different categories. Um, it just shows just what went into the making of this show, and that it's being recognized, and it's such a high quality show. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Uh, Kind of. I think along the same lines as you. It just kind of shows how much of an impact it had because it had a huge impact launching a brand new streaming service. So that you said that's a big thing, and it's nice to get the recognition, I guess, from the rest of the industry for
Hmm.
the show. I think it's going to win a couple of those. I'd like to see
Yeah.
Ludwig win. Um,
Hmm.
I, I'd like to see Giancarlo Esposito win, but I mean, he was only really in 2 episodes.
Right.
I don't know. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know if that
Yeah.
has
I
a
think
bearing on it, but
I think the actual category he was nominated was like kind of like a special appearance almost. It was, not like a
yeah. Okay.
not like lead actor or supporting actor even, but like something like
Okay.
along those lines.
Gotcha. Yeah. So
good guest
yeah,
spot.
I think it'll win a couple of those. I wanted to mention something though that's not related to that at all. But Taika Waititi, I started watching What We Do in the Shadows.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
I
wacky
haven't seen
show.
that
That
yet.
is crazy, but I was laughing.
Yeah,
It's a very
yeah.
his sense of humor is very different, and
Hmm.
makes me interested to see what else he wants to do in Star Wars because it was you should watch a
Well,
little bit of it. It's interesting, man. It's
before I even knew who Taika Waititi was, you know, Korg in
oh yeah,
Thor
right.
Ragnarok.
Hmm.
Oh my goodness, I was laughing out loud watching that movie, and then I realized that he did the voice for him later on.
Yeah,
Um, just cracked me up.
yeah. What We Do in the Shadows is very 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 different, but man,
Yeah.
it has some funny stuff. You should check it out. You probably appreciate some of the humor.
Hmm.
Very not kid friendly, by the way. Anyone listening, don't watch it with kids.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah, I think I gave that warning last week about
yeah,
Ozark not
yeah.
being for kids. But yeah, moving on to our next news, and this is in the world of games. This comes straight from StarWars.com. We got some casting and details revealed about Tales from the Galaxy's Edge. So, as far as casting goes, Bobby Moynihan, who appeared in Star Wars Resistance, he did voice work for that show. I forget which character it was, but he will star as Cecil Slack. Cecil Slack, I think, a bartender with a penchant for storytelling who is central to the story. And we're also getting Deborah Wilson, who lent her voice to Jedi Fallen Order, and she portrayed the character of Seer, I believe it was. Correct me if I'm wrong. And she's joining the
Yeah,
cast
she was
as
Sarah.
Seer, yeah. And she's
And
joining the
Bobby
cast
Moynihan
as
sorry, go ahead. You
that's okay.
finish.
She's joining the cast as Tara Rashin or Rasheen or something like that, who is a Quarren pirate who leads a cell of the Guavian Death Gang, the Guavian Death Gang, who
Yep.
operates on Batu.
Bobby Moynihan, by the way, is Orca, and
Thank you for that. And in Tales from Galaxy's Edge, you play a droid repair technician who crash lands on Batu after a pirate attack. So just there's also a featurette that was released on YouTube and on the Star Wars website. It was actually 4 to 5 minutes long. And gives a nice look at this upcoming game from ILMX Labs.
yeah,
That'll
yeah,
be
it looks very fun.
hmm
It's only going to cost me a few $100s to play it, so that's cool.
right, because you got to get the Oculus or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so yeah, so pretty cool. I think one of the main things they wanted to do was replicate the feel of Galaxy's Edge, being on Batu and everything, the look and the feel of that planet. So that'll be pretty cool to explore.
yeah, definitely.
Um, and up next, in gaming news, we have a possible leaked image of the title screen for Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga. I feel like I've been hearing about this game forever, um, and, but it's finally going to be coming out in October, I believe. Um, let me check that.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
October sounds right.
Yeah, October. Um, so one of the images that is attached to this article on Star Wars Newsnet actually shows Rey with her yellow lightsaber. I don't know if we'll see that in the game at some point. I think that'd be really cool. Um, but there's some leaked images on there, and there were also some quotes released from some of the makers of the game, suggesting that something's coming soon. Like I felt a great disturbance. Um, Feel, don't think, use your instincts. I'm just a simple man trying to make my way in the universe. These were just like kind of cryptic tweets that were sent out by Tim Spencer.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
so we could maybe be getting news, but the release is October 20th, 2020 for the Skywalker Saga Lego Star Wars. So Adam, will you be picking this one up?
Probably not. I haven't
Okay.
played a Lego game. I have played Lego Star Wars games a while
Hmm.
ago, and they're fun. But I haven't
Yeah.
played a Lego Star Wars game in years. So, um,
Yeah. I I'm kind of excited about this. I think I might actually get this one because
It might be
I
good to
do
play
love
with
games
the
where
kids.
you
You
yeah, and
know,
play with
play
Sydney
with her.
and
Yeah, play with your daughter. I could play with Grace. I don't know.
yeah. And like I love games where you actually go through and play out what happened in the movies. Like I miss those
Okay.
kind of video games, like going through the saga and playing on all those different scenarios and action set pieces from the films. I'm very interested in that type of game, even though it's Lego. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of excited.
Yeah, nothing wrong with the Lego games. They're
No,
really well made. They're usually
yeah,
pretty
they're well
funny.
done
They're got some good sense of humor. Like I said before, great to play with family if you're out there with kids
hmm
or whatever. So
for sure. In the as far as like conventions go, we have from farthest from actually um, have gathered together Star Wars creatives, fans, and special guests to create Empire 40. Speaking of 40-year anniversaries, um,
yep.
which is a special 9-hour live stream event celebrating the Empire Strikes Back. That's going to take place tomorrow, starting 9 a.m. Eastern, and they're actually it's split up into three different segments basically. Um, and so you have Hoth, Dagobah, and then Bespin, in content surrounding those three locations from the film. So it might be something worth checking out.
Yeah, kind of cool seeing fan centered conventions popping up. We talked a couple weeks ago, I think, about our friends Scarif, Scuttlebutt did Scarif Gone,
hmm
and then we have Force Fest comes up later this month, and then now that's actually tomorrow, uh, on
hmm
recording day here, August 2nd, and then the day that the podcast comes out will have been
Yeah,
that day. Uh, but it's really cool seeing fans kind of pick up the slack here and do some fun things in place of celebration.
yeah, for sure. I mean, they've kind of taken it upon themselves to step up and do these things, which I think is great. Um, and I'm seeing in the chat that we're going to be getting. I'm not sure if any of these are serious, but we got a droid series coming to Disney Plus. We
I
got
could
a
see that one.
Bulio series. I could see the droid one, Bulio. I don't. It'll be headed there soon. I get it
Yeah, dad joke.
because he was beheaded.
Yeah, that would be Cam making a dad joke.
Yeah, yeah. um, our final news article is in the category of books, and we got a tweet from Delray at Delray Star Wars Books saying that the Mandalorian novel will be moving to fall 2021. It was supposed to be this December, I believe, but that's been pushed back. It seems like a lot of the novels here are being bumped back, which I think makes sense given our current situation.
Yeah,
So
kind of odd to announce that one, just a few short weeks ago, and
yeah, and then
and
say,
then
"Oh,
now, oh,
wait,
you know what?
actually, it's going to be a
Yeah,
year later."
yeah, give us another year on that one. But
Yeah.
I
So
mean, it's cool that we're
unfortunate,
still
but
getting. I'm still excited for it. I guess it'll coincide nicely with season 3 of Mandalorian, but um,
yeah, that's what I
it's
was
just
thinking.
just really weird timing with announcing
Mhm.
that and then delaying it a few weeks later.
Yeah, that was interesting,
Yeah.
but that wraps it up for our news this week. And I think we're about ready to thank the maker once again.
Thank the maker. This oil bath is going to feel so good.
So, like I said at the top of the show, there's a lot of stuff to talk about with this one, and I just want to remind everyone out there that we could talk for 4 hours about A New Hope, and I don't think we'd cover everything. So
Yep.
we're gonna kind of go through and give kind of our favorite little factoids, tidbits of knowledge about A New Hope. Uh, I used a couple sources here. I'm pretty sure you probably used the same audio commentary as me, but I listened to audio commentary with George Lucas, Carrie Fisher, Ben Burt, and Dennis Muren. I
I
also
actually
checked
listened
out
to the one that was
with the cast and crew.
the full cast and crew
Okay,
archival
cool,
commentary.
nice. I also checked out, and I'm going to recommend this book to anyone that hasn't checked it out yet. But I mentioned at the top of the show, it's called Making of Star Wars by J.W. Rinsler. I actually went ahead and got this on ebook uh, format, mainly because A, it was like $40 cheaper,
Mhm.
and B, because it actually comes with some pretty cool extra content, being audio clips of interviews, video clips, some pretty cool stuff there. So it's only
That's
like
cool.
yeah, it's only like $12.99 for an audio
Mhm.
book. The actual larger, almost like coffee table style size book is a little bit more. I was seeing it for like $50 or $60 brand new.
Yeah, that's quite a
Um,
difference.
but really great like behind the scenes pictures, pictures of like scanned copies of notes and
Mhm.
scripts. And one of the cool things they do is the book progresses, is they kind of show you the progression of the story itself. um in that, stories, we talked a few weeks ago, I forget what show number that was, about the Star Wars, the comic
Mhm.
series that came out. So they kind of give you a rundown of, these are the main plot points at this point in time, and then as things progress they change, and you can see where uh the final elements come into play.
Right.
So definitely, if you're out there listening and you become interested in what happened behind the scenes of A New Hope, I would strongly recommend checking out The Making of Star Wars by J.W. Rinsler. But anyway, getting into the casting of A New Hope, I remember when we talked about The Phantom Menace and how many kids they interviewed for the role of Anakin.
Mhm.
It kind of sounds like almost the same thing happened with The New Hope here, where casting sessions, sometimes they would go through 250 people a day, just to go through that many people. Blows my mind. Um,
Yeah, that's just crazy to me. I wouldn't have it. I mean, I get overwhelmed easily, so I wouldn't. I'd be like, I don't know who to pick. There's just too
yeah,
many.
right. Um, one thing that I thought was funny is, we talked before about how George Lucas talking can just kind of be an interesting experience. Very knowledgeable guy, but I think he can kind of
Mhm.
get himself lost sometimes. Some of the
You
young
sure?
actors that came through just really got confused with his line of questioning through these interviews. Where the paraphrase on some of these, they would come in and sit down and say, "Okay, what do you want to talk about?" And he'd, "Oh, I don't know, what's going on with you," type of thing. And they would walk out, and like, I think it was Mark Hamill would come out and say like he had no idea what just happened there,
Right.
Um, but Lucas actually wanted to cast a lot of unknowns, and this is one of the
Mhm.
things that we had mentioned earlier. Uh, where he wanted to keep the fantasy of this movie intact and not have people reminded of other movies that big stars would have been in. So, like we talked about with The
Yeah,
Dark Knight
The
Rises,
Dark
where
Knight Rises. Yeah.
Josh and I being from Pittsburgh, uh, we immediately recognize like Heinz Ward and Ben Roethlisberger, and seeing those
Mhm.
faces kind of takes us out of, this is a Gotham City story.
Right.
So that was one of the things that George wanted to avoid with this movie, and one of the reasons why he tried to stay with some more unknown actors at that time.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that was very wise on his part. I mean,
Yeah,
because I think it really does lend itself to feeling more immersed in the universe that he created and everything, the galaxy that he created. To have these actors that weren't as familiar at the time, um, when it was released.
yeah. So for Princess Leia, he was really looking for someone who was like a strong character, a ruler of people. She's a princess. So Carrie, we know Carrie now, but Carrie,
Hmm.
that strong, worldly. She was short of herself. Just made that character work. Luke, he was wanting someone more innocent, and then someone he could kind of keep out of the mainstream of things happening in the galaxy. So you kind of see him being on a farm somewhere else. Alec Guinness was. I like seeing interviews with Alec Guinness. He's not really like a Harrison Ford type thing, disinterested in it, but I think he got tired of it later after
Hmm.
after doing it. However, he was pretty excited to get a Lucas script. He said he admired his work on American Graffiti. And I'll tell you, reading real quick aside about American Graffiti, reading the making of Star Wars, so much of this movie hinged on the success of American Graffiti.
Hmm.
That movie is mentioned so many times, and
Yeah.
if that movie hadn't done well, I don't know if we'd be talking about this stuff.
Right.
But American Graffiti uh, kind of caught Alec Guinness's attention. Um, he said though he was less enthusiastic when he learned that this next Lucas movie would be uh, a sci-fi movie. But
Hmm.
after he read it, he became invested in it. He started seeing touches of Tolkien, which was interesting for me, being a huge
Yeah.
Tolkien fan. Um, and then Anthony Daniels actually was kind of similar in that he was not excited at all to play a robot. But then, a lot of people say this after meeting with George. He just kind of took to George and liked him, and then kind of wanted to work for him. So.
Yeah, and I think he had this vision, and
Mm-hmm.
once he explained it to you, it seems like they were kind of like, oh, okay, now I get this character, I get what we're doing here, and they were on board. I will say that any scene in A New Hope that Alec Guinness is in is I just love. I think he just brings something to that film. Um, he just brings an extra element, a special element to it, and um, I just and also I love the boldness of Leia. Yeah, since I was a kid watching it for the first time, I've always loved how bold she is, and just like how she bosses the guys around. Get this walking carpet out of my way. And she's just this great, strong female character that I always had an appreciation for, and um, I, just great casting.
Yeah, agreed. She talked a little bit in the audio commentary about the age difference between Harrison and Mark. Harrison was 33 when this started, had kids. Mark was a lot younger, um, so there wasn't a whole lot of mingling in between them, which was kind of interesting because I think they got a little bit tighter as the years went on. But there was definitely you definitely saw a camaraderie building there. I think, but uh, kind of an interesting separation in age.
Hmm.
Harrison Ford talked about two qualities he noticed in Star Wars: a familiar coming-of-age adventure story, and then the unique visuals. So why don't you mention that?
Yeah, I picked up on that one when I was watching, and I think the great thing about Star Wars is that underlying mythology and the hero's journey and the coming of age story. I'm really interested in that, having that base um, in a film like this, and starting from that point. But then you have this. It's not your typical hero's journey. It's not your typical coming of age story. It's not your typical myth. You're putting it into this unique world where aliens exist, and you're in space, and it's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and there's so much uniqueness to it that it makes that old way of storytelling fresh. Um, so I think any Star Wars film in the future that models that and has that base in that coming of age hero's journey, I think it can always be successful if you're grounded in where George was grounded, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. And then Peter Mayhew, and I think you wrote this also for a note, but he made the Chewbacca sounds on set, but his voice was never actually used in the final cut. I actually remember Anthony Daniels was kind of the same, where
Hmm.
they weren't even going to use Anthony Daniels' voice, and then he just was so good at projecting that 3PO um, characterization, or however he ended up doing it. But
Yeah.
they actually ended up just having him do the voiceovers. But same with Chewbacca, where so much of that noise on set just shows up in the audio reels, and
Hmm.
they mentioned a lot of times they would just have to throw that all out and voice over the whole thing. So
Right. Yeah, I just found that interesting. It was something that I didn't really think about or realize, and then I wondered too if the same was true with Jonas and everything. Because I know he makes he does a pretty good job of sounding like Chewie. So it makes me wonder if it was all done later as well with you know.
Yeah, yeah, right. Uh, I thought this was an interesting quote. George Lucas said he wanted to make the ultimate kids movie. And we're sitting here. I'm 35. I'm talking about this movie.
Yeah.
He did say later that he was kind of looking for a movie in the age of, for the 12 to 20-year-old range,
Hmm.
because there wasn't a whole lot back
Yeah.
then for that in this genre.
Yeah.
But yeah, the ultimate
Yeah.
kids movie.
I always find it interesting when he says that, because part of me totally agrees, and yeah, like when I was 10 years old to 12 years old, in that gap, in that period of time, I was watching these movies and I fell in love with them. So it's very true. But I think also as an adult, because again, it's grounded in that the mythology, the hero's journey, the coming of age, becoming a man, having that mentor, and then the mentor passes on, and so then the person who is being taught then has to become kind of the leader, and we see that in Lord of the Rings as well. Bringing up Tolkien again with Gandalf and Frodo and their relationship reminds me of Obi-Wan and Luke. And so I think anytime that you have a story grounded like that, it can be appealing to most ages. You know what I mean? Um, so adults and kids alike.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Uh, I always this next comment, I've always felt this about A New Hope, and it was interesting to see. This may be why I feel this about A New Hope. But the early drafts of this movie started with this actually being two movies, one ending after the Death Star escape, and then the other ending with the destruction of the space station itself.
Hmm.
Um, I've always felt that way about A New Hope, how it feels like after the Death
After
Star
they escape
escape,
the Death Star, it
that's one
feels like
story,
the movie's over.
and then
But then there's
yeah,
this
right,
added piece
and
to it.
yeah, and then but then we start with
Hmm.
blowing up the Death Star. Um, I've always felt that that was like two different stories,
Hmm.
and it's interesting to see that that might be where it comes from. That part of those early drafts and early scripts shining through still.
Right, that makes sense.
Um, you know, A New Hope went through a ton of stuff behind the scenes, in the early days. A lot of that had to do with budgets from Fox. Production was actually put on hold late in 1975 until budget cuts were made. George had already put at this point $400,000 of his own money uh, into this movie, and he actually had said a few times he really wasn't expecting it to make a lot of money. He was
Hmm.
thinking, I think he said somewhere within the like 16 to 25 um, million range. And they were trying to shoot for a budget. Fox wanted them down around like 7 million
Yeah.
for a budget. And then he says once you add in things like advertising and all the other stuff on top of that, then you really don't make much back. So he wasn't really expecting to make a lot of money on this, and he's putting that much into it of his own money.
Yeah, I
um,
think George mentioned the expectation at that time was to basically break even, but then make money off of like selling it to TV stations and stuff like that, you know.
right, right. Um, Due to these budget cuts, there were some interesting things removed. Alderaan was in the movie at one point, and it was
Mhm.
taken out. A lot of those scenes that happened on Alderaan in earlier versions were then moved to the Death Star. Uh, the rebels were kind of supposed to be outside in the jungles on Yavin, which I thought was kind of cool because we see that again in Rise of Skywalker. It's almost like that idea came back a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, but they moved them inside into the hangars on Yavin, just kind of a way to make it a little cheaper to shoot, a little better on the budget.
Yeah, and then finally with the prequels and Revenge of the Sith, he got to put Alderaan in there actually. So yeah,
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, right.
came full circle.
Yeah, and we talked a long time ago about Utapau, how how
Hmm.
how often he
Being one of
used
those
that name.
planets that was, yeah.
Yeah, and then he finally got to do it. So it seems like the prequels were kind of his chance to do everything that he didn't want to do.
Right. And I know that,
Well, not didn't want to do, didn't
sometimes,
have the means to do back then.
sure. And I know sometimes George Lucas gets criticized for even going back into the original trilogy and fixing things and remastering things and putting other things in. But, I remember in the commentary him kind of saying, I don't know an artist that if they can still go back and perfect their work, wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? So, and I think as long as it's George Lucas who's going back and making those changes to get it to the place where he intended it to go, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. George wanted to use these mythological motifs that he says he wanted to create something new, but then he also wanted this to be kind of a Saturday morning serial, and so he talked a lot about remembering going to the theater, and seeing these Saturday morning uh, sh- series. Kind of
Hmm.
he equated it to kind of like modern TV, where you have the weekly story type thing. But he used that as kind of his vessel to tie all this stuff together. Um,
Hmm.
which I found very interesting. And then the look of the film, actually, and you've talked about this a lot. I don't know about on the show,
Yeah.
but with me,
Yeah.
the look of the film being lived in, it's not pristine. R2's beat up. All that has a purpose.
Hmm.
It doesn't look like other sci-fi of its time.
Yeah, and that's what I love about this because yeah, it separates itself from other science fiction films, in that it is very lived in, and things are kind of dirty and worn, and it makes it feel real, it makes it feel gritty, and I really like that about it. Which is why I've always kind of preferred the original trilogy over the prequels for that main reason, just because everything feels and looks so real, and I think it makes it more timeless in a way.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. Uh, Lucas was amused by using the two. It's also interesting how this happened. So we'll talk about this a good bit. But he was amused by using the two least interesting characters in 3PO and R2 to tell the first part of the story. He said
Mhm,
that was inspired by Kurosawa, which is one of
mhm,
the filmmakers that he was inspired by at that time. But reading the making of Star Wars, it's interesting how that idea kind of came about, because initially Luke's story was kind of intercut in between all of the Leia
mhm,
stuff, and uh, again, due to budget cuts, a lot of that had to be taken out. Um, so that didn't actually happen with R2 and 3PO telling this part of the story until they had to take those things out, and when that happened, um, the story as it stood that way was actually more told from their perspective. So I think that was
mhm.
something that kind of happened. It wasn't intentional, and then he saw how that worked and how much he liked it at that point. But yeah,
Yeah, it's
and
it's
and I
really
never really thought
interesting,
about that either, about how that first part of the story is told from their perspective. Not so much
right?
anyone else's. So
Yeah, and I mean, we don't see our main character, Luke, until almost maybe 20 minutes into the film, or something to that effect. So yeah, very, very interesting.
yeah. So production issues. Let's talk about some of these now. We talked about budget cuts. Tunisia was plagued with issues. George said he only got about half of what he needed after 10 days of shooting there. He said, they'd have to come back and do some other shooting, but then also they would do shooting in Death Valley, the United States deserts, and to make up
Hmm.
for what they couldn't get in Tunisia. Um, but then there was plenty of other production issues as well outside of Tunisia. George, for example, was unhappy with the lighting on a lot of scenes from ILM. They had to repaint some of the setting, some of the sets, specifically the hallway scene. They had to try some different colors of gray to get the right lighting. Um, the film was really late. It was over budget. There was a lot of problems with this movie, and uh, sometimes it's a little surprising that Fox didn't just pull the plug on it.
Hmm.
Um, but I want to mention that specifically, just because of things that gets said around the internet these days about movies. I mean, production issues, especially on movies like this, are not uncommon. You know,
Right. Yeah, I mean it's always a work in progress. You're trying to get to that finish line, and problems come up, and um, you have to address them and carry on and everything. And I think it's a part of the process, Um, and I think George even, I don't know if he said this in the commentary, but it was alluded to that he was kind of just like, hey, do what you can on the day, and then if we have to figure it out later, we'll figure it out later. Like that type of thinking, basically, knowing that those kind of things would arise.
right? Moving on to the soundtrack, let's talk about John Williams a little bit. Um, John Williams said that yeah, George wanted this more symphonic sound. And then John said that after he had watched his screening of the unfinished version at the beginning, um, that he could really see why that type of soundtrack fit more than the kind of the techno electronic sounds of science
Hmm.
fiction. That were kind of common, more common. Um, so I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think.
I think with like the fantasy elements of the story, that it definitely fits more of
Yes.
a soundtrack like that. So
Because I was thinking that exact same thing. Because this is more science fantasy than science fiction, I think it lends itself to the types of sounds that we end up getting. I think it would have been really cheesy, if we were watching Star Wars today and it had all those kind of space sounds of the 70s and all those kind of electronic sounds and stuff of the
yeah,
time of the
right.
time. I think what John Williams brings to it just elevates it that much more. So I'm really happy with that decision.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so we talked a little bit about John Williams having an initial screening. The book that I read had Making of Star Wars mentions a few different screenings. One to Lucas's family and friends, and got a little bit of mixed results there. Steven Spielberg, for example, was very enthusiastic.
Mhm.
Said that he loved it. He was totally on board. Brian De Palma was pretty much the opposite, and George said that Brian was kind of that way, and he was kind of caustic was the word that George used. Um,
Mhm.
but even with the kind of negative opinions of De Palma, his contributions actually led to a change in the opening crawl, because the original opening crawl kind of focused on what happened, like hundreds of years ago, and
Mhm.
the what De Palma had stressed and what ended up happening was that it covers more of what leads into the movie directly. What happened in the more
Right.
recent past, almost
Mhm.
immediate past, and not focusing so much on the mythology from way back when.
Yeah.
Um, Alan Ladd also, he also always gets mentioned as the one that greenlit Star Wars, and was very into it. Um, Alan Ladd seemed to be a little bit nervous after seeing it for the first time, and where a couple Fox executives were very much on board at that point. I remember, I forget which one it was, but there's mentions of one being moved to tears because he loved it so much. Um, Alan Ladd was a little nervous, and he said that after that screening was done, um, Ladd came over to George and just said, "Hey, George did a did a really good job," and just kind of left.
Mhm.
And even actually called Spielberg after Steven Spielberg got a chance to see it, just to kind of get his impression on it, almost like he's trying to ease his fears about this.
Yeah, like, what do you think about that?
Right. Um, i- Lucas also, this is one of the things that makes the story a little bit different. But Lucas assumes that everyone in the story knows about the things that happen in the universe, like the oil baths where people keep their speeders, how things work, in that universe. Um, George said when it came out, he felt that that was a lot to take in for a viewer, but now everyone just kind of
Mhm.
accepts that, and then they get more involved in the story than how things actually work. Um,
Right.
you know, he threw the audience into an alien world without explaining a whole lot, and that worked. Um, less
Yeah.
time, less exposition, less explaining, and more jumping into the story.
I love the approach. I think, explaining too much, having too much exposition, and we know how people react to that nowadays. That, oh, you didn't explain this, you didn't explain
Yeah,
Snoke's
right.
backstory, you didn't.
Yeah, yeah,
People
yeah.
react differently today to that, but I think at the time this was an excellent approach because you just jump right into the action. You
I
let
still
the
think it's an
audience kind of
excellent approach. I don't
figure.
think
It
that's
still is.
changed.
I agree. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, and even like back working on The Force Awakens when JJ and Lawrence Kasdan were writing the script for The Force Awakens, I think Lawrence Kasdan had to tell JJ like, "Look, we don't need to explain this. Like we don't need to spell this out for the audience,
right.
we can they'll figure it out. We don't want to put that much exposition and everything into it. So I think that was, Lawrence Kasdan kind of learned that working on the original trilogy and contributed in that way too.
Yeah, and then kind of the same. This is, I think, one that didn't get worked out. But as far as the parsecs things go, being a
Yeah,
measure of distance and not time
distance and not speed or time. Yeah, yeah.
or speed, yeah. George
Hmm.
talked about that a little bit, and he he said that the Falcon is fast not because it has speed, but because its navigation system is good enough for in getting it from point A to point B that it cuts out the distance and
Hmm.
gives it that time, right?
Yeah.
So, and we kind of saw that in Solo,
I
you
was
know.
gonna say it's a great connection to Solo with, is it L3
Yeah,
who is now
yeah,
part of the navigation system.
yeah. But
Hmm.
even doing the Kessel Run there, you saw how they kind of figured out how they're gonna cut out that distance, to make it in was it 12 parsecs. I'm blanking.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Um.
12.
So I thought it was cool to get that. That's one of those little explanations that was really a reach for people to understand. I
Hmm.
think. So
Yeah,
it didn't work in every instance, but that's kind of a tough one to. It's kind of a tough one to infer. I think.
yeah.
But if you ever get hung up on the distance not time thing, there's George's explanation. It's
Yep, there it
because of its
is.
navigation system.
Fun fact.
The lightsaber fight, Obi-Wan and Vader, one
Hmm.
of the most tame lightsaber fights that we ever got.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I don't know who it was exactly, but in the commentary he was saying how if there's one thing he would have liked to have gone back and reshot, it would have been that duel.
yeah,
Just because I guess what they were using for the sword fight, it kept breaking. So when they would, and I guess David Prowse obviously had more physicality than Alec Guinness, um, and so that was an issue too.
yeah. And George talked about it again, kind of explaining it. He explains this as being a very hard fight for both Vader and Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan's older at this point. Vader is now more machine, so a little more, I guess, clunky is what he was going
Hmm.
for. Which works until you get these more recent things with Vader where he's so dominating,
Right.
which almost kind of juxtaposes that version of Vader with what happens in 4, and it just maybe doesn't sit right, I guess.
Yeah.
But like you said
Maybe
with
he was just
breaking
taking
stuff
it easy on the
on the
old
old
man,
guy,
taking it easy on his former master and
that's very
everything. He just,
considerate of Darth
he
Vader.
he didn't he didn't break out like the full 100 mile
Yeah,
an hour fastball. He just scaled it down to like 95.
yeah, maybe that's where his light side is still shining through. There's good in him.
Right.
I don't know. Um, so getting into the technology, there's some cool technology stuff for the mid 1970s going on here. One of the things that came out of this is the Dijksterflex camera, which is considered one of the first motion controlled photography camera systems. It's named after John Dykstra, who did a lot of work on the visual effects shots in Star Wars. Mainly what this camera did, and I thought it's interesting that Dykstra himself kind of mentioned that this wasn't really the first version of this camera that was ever made, but I guess it kind of gets credited as being that. They could program this camera to repeat its action exactly, which solved a lot of issues with special effects. Um, so one of those kind of inventions out of necessity, I guess. Solving that type of problem for the special effects team. Um,
Did they use this camera for the trench run, or was that a
I
different?
believe so. Yeah, I believe that's the
Okay,
camera.
not 100% on that, but
I'm not 100% either, but I do believe that it
hmm
was involved in that. Yeah. But basically like I said, it was all digitally controlled. It allowed for 7 axes of motions to roll, pan, tilt, swing, boom, traverse, track, lens focus, motor drive, shutter control, and then, like I said before, it could duplicate that in multiple takes. So,
hmm
uh, sound design, Lucas wanted as many new sounds as possible, which means Ben Burt spent a lot of time, a year collecting and recording various sounds. Uh, for instance, the
I
voice of.
always
Go ahead.
Sorry, I just always
Oh,
find
that's
it
okay.
very fast. The sound editing and sound
Yeah,
mixing, I always
yeah,
find that stuff
yeah.
really interesting. How they go out and just how they record sounds, and you wouldn't even think when you hear it in the movie, you wouldn't even think that that's what it is. You know what I mean?
Right, right. And speaking of that, the voice of R2 ends up being Bert's own voice combined with the synthesizer for the
hmm
electronic elements of it, because they really wanted R2 to have that kind of character, not just beeps and things like that, but they wanted it to have more human type character. But that's an issue with something that there wasn't really precedent for that at the time. It's a character that speaks and beeps and things like that, but doesn't have a mouth. So it's
Right.
kind of hard to figure that out.
hmm
Lucas had mentioned at one point that he wanted to almost sound like a baby learning to talk, with cooing and things
hmm
like that. So that was kind of the key to figuring out what R2 would sound like.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think the more you watch and listen to R2, the more you understand which sounds mean he's like scared or which sounds mean he's happy or those types. I think you pick up on that eventually, which is
yep.
which is neat.
The Death Star plans were actually in the scene where we're getting ready to attack the Death Star. Those Death Star plans that they're showing on screen are actually computer animated. One of the
Hmm.
first uses of computer animation in a film like that. Uh, and then Martin Scorsese, who also saw some unfinished parts of this prior to its release, said that his first reaction was that this was tapping into an extraordinary revolutionary in technology, particularly in video games, which is interesting
Hmm.
because Pong, I guess, had come out just a few years before that. I think in 1972.
Yeah.
Um, kind of reminded me of that computer animated Death Star, and then tying this into today, we go back to
Mandalorian.
Mandalorian.
Yeah, because
Uh,
it was like the Mandalorian. It was kind of the opposite, where the Mandalorian that used video game technology and
yeah,
incorporated it into television.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's very
exactly.
interesting.
Uh,
hmm
so again, another example of just coming full circle on some of this
hmm
stuff. Video game
Yeah.
technology kind of influencing or being a major part of Star Wars. So,
hmm
and then I found this very interesting, but the X-wing pilots, the sound of their radios talking back and forth. They actually used shortwave radios for that. They transmitted the pilot voices through radio to get that realistic radio sound.
Hmm.
And then they kind of how you get farther away with the radio and you get the interference and how it sounds to Leia in the base. Um, That's
Yeah,
how they kind of made that stuff happen, is using a shortwave radio to kind of get that realistic radio sound.
it's
So
really interesting.
yeah, and it's cool. It was I was watching that again to hear that and to think of that coming through a radio instead of
Yeah,
so
right. Cool stuff.
yeah. Anything else to add for A New Hope?
Um, I just think, for whatever reason, A New Hope isn't among my very favorite
Yeah,
Star Wars films, but I
some of
think
it doesn't age great, I think.
right, but I think over the years and especially recently, I've gained a new appreciation for it, especially going back and
Yeah,
listening to this commentary and just the process behind all of it, the thought behind all of it, the passion behind all of it, and seeing The Mandalorian, I think has given me more of an appreciation for this particular film, um, and everything. So, it's definitely growing on me more and more when I see it.
yeah. Agreed. Going back and seeing some of this stuff, like you mentioned, seeing what went into this, like you mentioned the passion, but
Hmm.
the passion that went into this, the issues it had to overcome, um, all that stuff. For anything like I mentioned before that it doesn't really, some of it doesn't age well, but even for that stuff, going back and learning about actually what went into to making that stuff happen, I think
Yeah.
brings me to just a new level of appreciation for it. So, kind
For
of
sure.
makes it way more interesting to see on screen now, just to see,
Mhm.
what had to happen to make that all, end up the way it is.
Yeah, and I still think there's times, and this is especially true with like The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, but even with The New Hope, I think there's times that I look at the images on the screen, I'm like, wow, this looks better than some of the stuff that's in the prequels, even. Um,
Mhm.
and I'm surprised. I'm like, wow, this was made in 1976, came out in 1977, and some of these shots they look really good still. Um, and so just kind of for the most part, it still stands the test of time. And like I said, even more so in Empire and Return of the Jedi. Um, there are those scenes here and there that, like you said, didn't age quite as well, but overall, I think it's still an impressive looking film so many years
Yeah,
later.
it really is. Yeah.
Hmm.
Cool. All right. Are you ready to wrap up episode 40?
Let's do it.
I'm just glad you're here. At the end.
Thank you again for tuning in. We really appreciate seeing everyone here hanging out in chat, listening on a podcast later. Uh, we, we've our audience has just been growing. It's been so much fun to see that happen. Um,
Hmm.
Live chats on YouTube have been so much fun lately. So thank you everyone for being a part of that. It wouldn't be nearly as fun without all of you here. Um, so
Absolutely.
thanks today for everyone that we saw on YouTube, which would have been Roar Farm Boy, Mr. Rez, Vader's Girl, Michael from 2Med2, Alberto from Radio Rebellion, Dale Erdman, Cam Ray, Stephen Miller. I think that covered everybody. Like I always say, if I missed you, I didn't intend to. I'm very sorry, but always glad to have you here. Um, Remember to is if you're listening live, subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and if you're using one that lets you leave a review, we would appreciate that. Uh, doesn't have to be 5 stars. I would love for it to be 5 stars. But if there's anything you'd like to see us do better, change up. If there's things that you like more than others, let us know. That helps us tailor our content so that it can be best, for your entertainment. So
Yes,
check out
constructive criticism is welcomed.
Yep. Check out the website from a certain point of view.com. There you'll have see some blog articles. You can contact us, send us questions, show topics, anything you can think of. Our socials, Twitter is at certain POV pod. Facebook page is from a certain point of view. Discord server link is in the show notes and it's also on the website. Our email is certainpovpod@gmail.com. And we are hosted by Anchor.fm, where you can leave us a 60-second voicemail. If you have any comments on the making of A New Hope or any of our past episodes, feel free to leave a voicemail. We'd love to play it on the show. Remember, we are part of the Red 5 Network. You can visit red5network.com for all the amazing podcasts there on the Red 5 Network. There's some great podcasts. You can find hours of entertainment there every week to fill all of your Star Wars needs and more. So check that out. Remember, I am on Twitter is the best place to find me, at thegauze85. I also want to mention I'll be hanging out later tonight with the Force Losers podcast. We're talking some Power Rangers on Force Losers. That's going to be a lot of fun. Josh, where can everyone else find you?
You can find me on Twitter at JediJarJar1722 or occasionally writing articles for StarWarsNewsNet.com. And once again, I just want to echo what Adam said and thank you all so much for joining us today, either live or later. And again, we truly appreciate it. And do remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well so you can watch the videos.
We have 55 subscribers. I'd love to get to 100 so we can get rid of that ugly
I'd love to
looking
see
YouTube
that climb.
link. Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, keep an eye out this week for our weekly poll and to our Twitter feed as well. And just remember that everything we said today was true.
From a certain point of view. Awesome. All that talk about a long show, and we kept it to an hour.
Yeah, we did. I like the hour-long show. I think it's nice and good amount of time.
Yep,
good work
I
today.
agree.
And thanks again, everybody, for joining us live and being in the chat.
Yep, thank you. Thanks for stopping by, RFB. Michael, thanks for hanging out. I know you were probably not listening, volume's not on, but I know you're out camping or some other stuff, so I appreciate you checking us out still. All right, stop the recording. I'm probably going to end the stream here. I've got a ton of stuff to do this afternoon, so
fair enough. I've got a lot as well, so I'm with you there.
Yeah, our church is getting ready to go live and do that type of stuff, so I got to make sure that that's working for tomorrow. So,
gotcha.
It's gonna be a long afternoon.
A bedroom to remodel ish.
Ooh, that sounds less fun than mine.
Some painting, some pulling carpet again. So it should be fun.
Nice. All right. Yep. Till next Saturday, RFB. We appreciate it.